What's up, CUT family? I am so excited to be here today. This is the latest installment of the CUT Collective Rewind, and we are rewinding on the lesson sermon from November 10th, 2024. I have with me the Reverend Gaylon McDowell, and I'm telling you what's in store. We're part of a series now called the Unbreakable Foundation. Pray, then perform. That's what we're going to rewind. Pray, then perform. And if you please go and watch that. Go to CU Temple, and you can click on watch the sermon, or you can go to YouTube and go to our channel and find this sermon. But what I want to emphasize is the power of this lesson. We're getting ready to dive in, so I want you to strap in. So Rev opens up the sermon with kind of helping us to think through the results of the election, getting yourself in a space emotionally where you can where you can shift to the truth, right? And so we're gonna work with that today. We're gonna talk about, oh my gosh, the powerful points that came out of the lesson. And so I want you to get ready. You might want to take notes today, because I know that the sermon by itself was just so packed full of good stuff. But what we unfold today is going to go even deeper, and it's going to be even greater. So I want to invite you to do that. Also, go ahead and while we're getting ourselves together, I want you to go ahead and share this, because I know that you have somebody in your life that's at some emotional unrest. I know that you have someone in your experience who is trying to process what's going on in the world. And so I want you to go ahead and share with them right now so that they can join in. And I want you to know that we're taking your questions and we'll fold them into the conversation. So if you're watching us live, I want to invite you to put your questions in the comments, and we're going to have an experience today where I want to meet you at your area of need. I want to meet you in the space where you want some fresh insight. And so we're going to come together and have that experience. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Reverend Gaylon McDowell today.
Hey there. Hey, Reverend Sheree.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Handling the Father's business, as they say in the church world. Yeah, handling the business.
Handling the business. That's a good thing. All right. So we're going to have some fun today. So I'm going to flip it a little bit, right? So I told Rev this, and he was like, do what you do. But we're going to talk about the sermon first. I know that if you watched the lesson, you saw that he started with the election. But I want to go into this powerful lesson today. And so pray and then perform is the lesson. So I know what inspired the lesson, meaning that this lesson was a gut punch to anybody dealing with their feelings about this election. But you brought up a really powerful excerpt from Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman. And I want to make sure that I want to pull that one in. So I'm just going to give the quote that you shared, that our prayers are not answered because our prayers are not being answered because instead of being God-centered, we're being problem-centered. Mm-hmm. So tell me how you shift from a problem-centered to to God-centered approach to prayer.
Well, one of the things that New Thought teaches is that prayer should be affirmative. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes people pray to rehearse their problems. Let me tell you about all of these problems that I have. And without the other part of getting clear about what is it that you want as a desired outcome. And like, can you see it? Can you feel it? Can you believe it? So the first thing I would tell people is to shift your attention. And I realize that sometimes that can be difficult. This is why, for instance, at the end of the sermon, I did a piece of prayer treatment to help people learn how to breathe, get into your body, shift your attention, because sometimes you have to do some outward things to pull your mind back to where you want it to be. But the key is, if you're problem-centered, then that's worry. I don't know if that's really prayer. You're rehearsing the problem over and over again. And this is why, I don't know if you're going to pull this quote up later, but I quoted our friend, Reverend Michael Beckwith, who said, stop telling God about your big problem and start telling your problem about your big God. That's a perspective shift. That's a perception shift. That's a context shift. That's creating a new paradigm, because we turn the challenges of life into these insurmountable obstacles, and then we wonder why we don't have the energy to take them on, because we're not being God-centered. So sometimes we just have to remind ourselves about the truth about God, sometimes, and God in us. So, for instance, just to be brief, you know, you might be in a situation where you might not be able to, you're so up to your neck in the challenge, you know, per se, that sometimes you just need to just start telling yourself what's the truth about God. God is peace. God is love. God is joy. God is power. God is life, whatever that might be. And you're just saying it over and over. God is intelligence, because your subconscious mind might not have the resistance to that. Now, you might not be able to see in your mind a way out of what you're dealing with, but you can at least start affirming the truth about God. Then I would say the next step would be affirming the truth about God in yourself.
Right.
So after you do
So,
all of this,
so let me stop you there, because I think that you know, you know, CUT is a New Thought Christian church, right? And so affirmative prayer might be a little bit of a shift. You may not even know that there is a certain way of prayer called affirmative prayer, right? And so this idea of this God-centered way of praying, I think that there are two things you said that I think are real hot. First is that praying the problem, that, you know, you take it to the Lord in prayer, right? And so when we take it to the Lord in prayer, we go and people talk about their problems. Like, that is a common way to pray. And so what Rev is introducing is a different approach to prayer, which is not to go and take your problems to the Lord in prayer, in the sense that I'm going to go and that's where my energy is going to stay. But you said something else that I want to pull in before I show that next clip. But this idea that prayer lifts the mind. Prayer lifts the mind. And so that is a core aspect of what you're talking about, is that, so even the approach to prayer is like the idea to unburden yourself, but it is to lift your mind. And so that quote by Dr. Michael Beckwith, say that again for me.
Stop telling God about your big problem and start telling your problem about your big God.
So that is a mind lifter. That prayer is a mind lifter. So I just wanted to share, because I know that even as someone who has been working with these principles for many, 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 many years and has practiced affirmative prayer for many, many years, I catch myself every now and then praying from a space where it's not lifting my mind. It's more, like you said, rehearsing the problem. Like, I'm worrying in my prayer time. And so if my prayer is not lifting me out of that, then I can work on a more effective prayer. You know, that's the opportunity that we have. So, and the reason for this is, I think this clip that I'm going to play really falls into, why do I need to lift my mind? Why do I need to pray?
All right.
And so I'm going to play this clip. This one, this is a good one. I'm going to play it.
Oh, the good one.
It's a good one. I mean, all my clips are good because they're coming from a good source.
Yes.
Your mind won't allow you to see something that you don't have the belief for. You only see what your mind allows you to see. And your mind has a way of turning off anything that it doesn't feel as though is important or is consistent with your belief system. So if I said today, look around the room and find everything that's orange. Your mind wasn't thinking about orange before. So your mind was closed to orange. Okay, but what if your mind is closed to, I could double my income? What if my mind is closed to, I can heal this disease? What if my mind is closed to, I can have peace in my life? What if my mind is closed to, I can be the best student at school? Your mind won't allow you to see what you don't believe.
Your mind will not allow you to see what you don't believe. So unpack that a little bit more. You said prayer lift the mind. I think you're building a case to pray.
Right. So one of the good reasons to pray is it elevates your thinking. It elevates your perspective. It elevates your perception, which I don't know if you pulled that clip as well. the perspective of perception. So one of the challenges that we have as human beings is the mind is a wonderful tool, but the mind can get attached to certain beliefs, perspectives, context, paradigms. And when it does that, it blocks out other options and opportunities because you're focused on what it is that you believe to be true. Regardless of if it's absolute truth, it's your relative truth.
Right.
Therefore, if something is a part of my relative truth, something comes into my space that's not a part of my relative truth, I have options. One, I can elevate my thinking and accept that as a possibility, right? I can be blind to it, or I can reject it. So what I was just trying to let people understand is a lot of times we don't even get to the rejection stage. We literally can't see the new possibility. We literally can't see the opportunity. We literally don't see the answer because we're functioning from too much of a limited perspective. And a lot of times when we feel as though that we're what's the word I want to use? Emotionally lost in a situation, that also creates another barrier that we have to work through, because when we don't have an understanding of something, often we resort to emotionalism, which now I got to work through that as well. Not only do I not see it, but now I'm dealing with anxiety. Now I'm dealing with fear. Now I'm dealing with frustration. Now I'm dealing with anger or whatever, the sadness, depression, whatever that might be, which is also pulling on you energetically.
Yeah.
So what prayer does is it gets you out of the lowlands of consciousness. And there's nothing wrong with having those emotions. Let me just be clear. But I'm saying that we should have the option of saying, I don't need to stay there. Okay, I feel it. I'm present to it. Now what? And if I can get across now what, I think we can make strides in our spiritual growth, because the now what is, now I need to pray, and my prayer needs to be God-centered, because when I pray, I'm literally lifting up my mind to the level of the answer, because the answer is available.
Yeah,
because I used to tell my students, and so I don't know if some of them are in here in my class, that there is a way. I might not be aware of the way, but there's always a way.
Yeah. You said that prayer lifts your mind, and so to the level of the answer. To the level of the answer. So what that statement of your mind only sees according to what you believe, and that prayer. So how, if I don't believe it, how do I get a shift in my experience? How do I believe something different? And that again, we're talking about the purpose of prayer. It is to lift your mind. And I want to emphasize again, if you don't know much about affirmative prayer, there are opportunities. I'll make sure that you get a good definition of it too. I'll pull one up for you and put it in our chats, because this may be a different way of prayer for you. And I want to make sure that you understand how it's all linking together. Your mind only sees according to what you believe. And so here, this clip is about the perception and perspective. I want you to that distinction. I'm going to play this, and then let's chat.
Okay.
Perspective creates perception. So what this ministry has been trying to do for 68 years is to help you get a new perspective, which will create a new perception, which will allow you to see God's opportunities and possibilities that were not there that you couldn't see previously. They were always there, but we couldn't see them.
So one of the things that I know for sure that we have to all be mindful of is the algorithms that are working alongside of when we're searching online. And so the algorithm feeds you more like what you just saw, right? And I think that from a perspective of when we pray, Sometimes we're praying at a level and we just keep experiencing what we're able to see. But you're shifting us here to say that our perspective creates our perception. And so talk about the perception that is just in this day, in this moment, that you say that we need to shift our perspective on something. What is that perspective?
You're talking about in general, not anything specifically.
Yeah, I mean, go where you want to
go. So, for instance, let's just talk about let's talk about love. Okay, that's your topic. You love to talk about love. All right, there's love as the spiritual idea. We say in metaphysics, the idea in divine mind, but let's just lower that down a few levels for everyone else. The spiritual idea and how it shows up in humanity. We talk about, the tender compassion and the cooperation and the kindness, etc. But when we start dealing with it from a real perspective point of view, when people hear the word love or they experience it, it's mixed with a whole bunch of other stuff. All right, which creates the perception of what love should look like and what it doesn't look like, which might be warped. That might be warped. So the higher your perspective of love, the higher your perception of love, which creates the higher opportunities for you to have love that meets your perception. See, you're not going to meet life. Let me say it this way. Another thing I tell my students in the Johnny Coleman Institute, you're not going to outperform your own consciousness. Therefore, what is the consciousness being based on? Our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, primarily, right? So what we see, because the think is the image, is directing what we believe and the feelings that we generate from the images we make. So depending on how I see life, whether it's a relationship, whether it's my spirituality, whether it's my money, whether it's my job, whether it's my business, whether it's the political culture, is that perception will drive, this is the key, Reverend Sheree, for me at least, not only how I experience it, not only how I see it, but also what I recreate out of the original experience.
Yes.
So I can empower or disempower myself solely based on how I see a thing. But how I see a thing is never just the thing. How I see a thing, my perception, is totally based on my perspective.
Yeah.
So just to give an example of something I saw on TikTok recently, and it was, there's so much stuff happening now with these relationship podcasts and and other stuff like that. So when somebody sends you something, you open it, now it's a part of your algorithm.
That's right.
You're getting all these videos. So that happened to me recently, and I don't think they realized they were talking about perception. The young lady was talking about accountability with relationships and what does that look like. And she made some valid points. And so around transparency, I believe that was what the conversation was around, accountability and transparency. So then the gentleman had some different perspectives. He gave transparency from a male perspective. So what was interesting to me was when the young lady was talking, the crowd was, yeah. And then when the guy started talking about this is what transparency looks like from our perspective, the crowd was not chanting, shouting, and roaring in approval. Why? Because they were seeing it from different perspectives.
Yeah. And I think that the power in understanding perspectives is also that you are in control of your mind. The perspective that you hold, you grabbed it. And so if there's a perspective that you need to change, you can let it go. And this is, again, one of the powerful things that happens through affirmative prayer.
It helps you change literally prayer helps you change your life narrative. Because because the belief, regardless of a person's new thought, metaphysical Christians like us, or they have different religious beliefs, what prayer does is it gets you out of the thought that you're dealing with something solely from the human perspective, that there is a higher, divine, godly perspective, principle, law, depending on, we all use our different language.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is, to quote one of those old songs we used to sing at CUT, there's somebody bigger than you and I. And from that perspective, that gives you an opportunity to think differently.
Yeah.
And that's the key. Can you think differently? And if you can think differently, you can create some different outcomes. And even if the facts don't change, your shift in perspective, which gives you a shift in perception, gives you the opportunity to be empowered in something that was previously disempowering you.
Mm-hmm. And so again, prayer lifting the mind from your current way of seeing things to a new way of thinking, a new way of seeing it. There's a quote that you gave. I just wanted to share this, and I'm going to go into my next clip. But prayer is right. This is from Dr. Johnny Coleman. Prayer is rising out of the darkness of mere human thought, which limits you and God. Prayer is rising up in consciousness, moving to the level of God's light of truth. And so when you're praying, I can say, okay, so prayer can serve a lot of purposes. It can be an unloading. It can be a space where you get some peace of mind, but it also is a very active experience of shifting your perception, shifting what you think about. And so I like the idea of that. I want to rise out of this idea of what I can see, the appearances and the thoughts and feelings and opinions of everybody else, including me, to something else. Can I think something different? Is there a different way to look at this? And so instead of having an intellectual pursuit of that, because I love the intellect, what is higher than that? Like that, I want to lift my mind beyond that, because I'm doing what I know. Right? I'm doing what I know. I'm living what I know. I'm experiencing what I know. And if I want to be experiencing something different, I got to know something different.
Right. You said it best. I don't know if I can add to anything other than what was just said. Yes.
I know I'm biting off your words. Okay, here is the next. here's the next clip. So this one is, again, I think this all works together, talking about your words.
Pray for what you desire to be and experience. And stop using words to bring your life down. Use your words to lift your life up. Watch how you are conditioning your subconscious mind with your words. When you repeat disempowering narratives from other people or yourself, you are conditioning your subconscious mind to create those beliefs as your self-identity. Repeat after me. Self-identity. See, we don't realize everybody has one.
So talk to us a little bit about self-identity, because this is really important. That like the idea that there's a definition of you that you either consciously created or allow somebody else to create.
Right. So when I say self-identity, it's at a deep subconscious level who we really think we are. All right. Now we have an identity. Now that doesn't mean we always live up to it, but we have an identity of who we present ourselves to be in the world, to ourselves, in relationship with others, whether that's professional or intimately. We have self-identity when it comes to health, to money, to religion, all different types. Every aspect of your life is wrapped in this concept called self-identity. Now, what I'm saying is, when you are using words, when you are speaking narratives from the world that don't empower you, or you're repeating stuff you've told yourself, you're actually creating or enforcing at times an self-identity that will not create the life situations that you desire. So sometimes when we see people who self-sabotage their lives, it's not because they're not good people. It's not because they can't be sweet, because their self-identity in that particular area of their lives won't allow them to see possibilities of harmony, love, joy, prosperity, success, and well-being, because their self-identity has already made up your mind about what that's supposed to be and what it is. And because you have a made up mind about it, there's no growth. Now, how can we flip this to the positive? If you create a self-identity that's built on the truth about God and the truth about yourself, who you are in God and who God is in you, you can create a self-identity that's open at the top, as Ernest Holmes would say, that allows you to have, how can I put it this way? Gary Simmons says the best, Reverend Gary Simmons, who wrote The Eye of the Storm, one of my favorite books. He would say, you have experiences, but you're not the experience. That's a different self-identity. Because sometimes when people go through stuff, they think they're the stuff.
Right.
And then once we pick up the identity, we want all the stuff that goes along with it. I can remember being a teenager and in the mid to late 80s, where you were hearing people say, young Black males are endangered species. And I can remember when I would hear that, it didn't sit with my soul, because that was a self-identity. And I'm like, well, an endangered species, why would I was not not only was I not new thought, I was probably no thought at that point. But I knew that wasn't something I needed to affirm for myself. I get what they were trying to get across. And I knew that wasn't for me.
Right.
I didn't want that self-identity. And because now I know what I didn't know then, that self-identity not only produces experience, but it also attracts experiences, because that self-identity is deeply embedded in the subconscious mind. So if you're going to tell yourself a story, tell yourself an empowering story. I mean,
easy. It's if you're gonna make it up, make up one where you win.
Right.
There's this, you quoted, you use this quote. I think these were just your words. If you lie to yourself long enough, you will not only believe the lie, but you will defend the lie. And this is so, it's like, not only will you defend the lie, but there'll be so much proof of that lie being true for you. Right. It's how we get into these cycles of poverty and cycles of poor relationships, right? Because if you lie to yourself long enough, and I think about the lies I tell myself about myself. Anytime you are limiting who you are, anytime you are limiting, that's a lie you're telling yourself about yourself. Does what you think about yourself reflect the nature of God? Like,
literally, there are people who will defend a lie. They will argue for their limitations. The problem is you get to keep the limitation. Right.
I mean, it's also how we look at the world. Like I got a couple more clips, but I have the clips I pulled from just the mind shift in terms of how we think about the results of the election. And the impact that we have, the story we're telling ourselves about it, about what it's going to mean for tomorrow and the future tomorrows. But that lying to yourself long enough, telling yourself the same story long enough, becomes a part of who you are, your self-identity. And I don't want to, when I paused and had to breathe on that for a minute. What lie have I been telling myself long enough? Right? That when someone tells me the truth, I defend the lie. Like, flip that question for yourself. Don't rise above it and say, yeah, they've been telling themselves lies long enough. What lie?
Yeah. We lie to ourselves, and we try to justify the lie by coming up with a lot of reasons. I was recently, watching what's the scientist's name? Astrophysicist Neil
deGrasse
Tyson. Yeah. And he has all these internet people trying to challenge this guy who's an astrophysicist, one of the top specialists in the world. And, you know, you got these flat earthers trying to come to him, trying to tell him why he's wrong, and every other scientist who basically shouldn't even be having conversations with these people about these subjects. Let's just be frank. And because of that, what ends up happening is, this is what's funny about it. You can have a self-identity that's overinflated, but it ends up putting you in a situation of loss, because you can't see where you can't see your blind spots and where you're wrong, because you're too invested in the lie. And you're invested in the lie so long that you'll defend the lie no matter what. You know, you see this in religion. And I don't want to go on whatever, but I'm just going to use this as an example. When people come up with their beliefs about Christianity or Islam or whatever. So I was in August, I was in the Atlanta area for a family reunion. My family, I have some relatives that live down there, so we all went down there. And I was at a place with one of my brothers, and it was a bunch of Egyptian guys. It was an Egyptian-owned place, establishment, where we were eating. And my brother's friends with all of the people. And we had a good time having a conversation. So then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, my brother's like, yeah, this is my brother. He's a minister, and he reads everything. And any question you have about the Bible, he can answer. You know, I'm trying to be in chill mode, relax. And then next thing you know, that invited the Islam, Christianity, Judaism, belief, Moses and Muhammad and all this. And I simply said very point blank, well, you don't know, maybe you might not be aware, but no scholar worth his salt believes that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. That is a thing of the past. And then they wanted to debate about it. Okay, and then, well, you know, the Quran is true and the Bible has been adulterated. And then I was saying, well, if that is, I was like, we all know that the Bible came from different sources over 1,500, not 1,500, no, probably about 1,100 years worth of data put into a material. Of course, it's going to have the whatever. But I said the only way you can know if even your book. See, this is. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about this, but you know, but this is the belief that things that get passed down. You know, people think that their holy book, whether it's the Bible, Quran, whatever, fell out of heaven into their hands. And all I said was, the only way you'll know if what you have is an original is if you have all of the pieces that created the original, so you can evaluate it. These are the different writings that we put together to make the Bible or whatever the religious book, versus saying this is the religious book and it just came directly from God, from the prophet, from the apostle, from the whatever. And they couldn't see it because religion has promoted the belief that how we get these scriptures don't have a human element, a very human element.
Right.
So people not only will defend it, in the case of religion, they will kill you over those beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why it's dangerous not to be open at the top.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to divert the conversation away.
No, but I think that's appropriate for what we're talking about and the climate we're in right now. That people are, and I'm not saying this from a liberal perspective, the Republican, Democrat, but some people are so married to their perceptions. And like you said, whatever lie is being told, because the biggest lie is that we're separate, is that there is a them and a us, right? We're all one.
Yeah.
And so everything after that is the lie, truly. Yeah. And so if we thought from the idea of oneness and everything we moved from and how we spoke and how we interacted with each other was from a perspective of I am one with, because we're all one with the one, I am one with you. There's nothing wrong with you because we're one.
Yeah.
All of this otherness is getting us into such. I mean, it's the human problem.
Yeah, yeah. What did H.M. Lee Katie say? All men believe themselves to be in bondage to the flesh and the things of the flesh. All suffering is the result of this belief.
All suffering.
Lessons in Truth, chapter 1, first paragraph.
Yeah. All suffering. So I want to play this clip because this I felt was a bit of a mic drop because honestly, you said it, but now I'm going to let you know how
I haven't watched the sermon, so all these are this is all new to me now as well.
I want to say that, right?
Yeah.
So I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Jesus taught how prayer works, and I think this is the best example of how he taught about prayer. He is saying that you pray to know, not to get. Don't miss that. You pray to know, not to get. Because what you know, you will have. Because there's no such thing as undemonstrated understanding. But I want you to get this part. Prayer isn't reasonable. Prayer isn't based upon limited human logic.
So 2 parts. So the first part is to pray to know, not to get. Mm-hmm. And again, this is an opportunity for us to shake up our perception of prayer and the practice of prayer to get better at it, right? Mm-hmm. There's a point when you're playing the scales. There's a point when you can play a concerto. I don't know if you all are John Baptiste fans, but he's taking Beethoven's greatest symphonies and putting blues and soul into. It's amazing because that idea is still expanding. So let's raise up our idea of prayer from this idea of it being like, I'm asking Santa for some presents for Christmas, right? I'm asking for some specific things. And so some of us pray for a specific outcome to the election, and we feel like Santa didn't give us what we prayed for. Mm-hmm. And so praying to know, not to get. And so you cruise by this. I know it's one of your favorite quotes, is that there's no such thing as undemonstrated understanding. So talk about that as it relates to prayer a little bit more.
Well, the term obviously comes from Emmett Fox, so I want to give proper credit to. I quote it a lot. People think it's my quote now because I quote it so much.
That's what happened. Say it 3 times. 3 times is mine.
So I am the embodiment of Emmett Fox's quote now because I don't know anybody else that says it in our community as much as I do. The idea behind it is that which I understand, or that which I realize, or that which I know, not surface knowing, but deep within my being, demonstrates itself. All right. So when I say pray to know, I'm not saying that you don't need to be specific with your prayer, or if you need health, pray for health. You need transportation, pray for transportation. I'm not saying that. I'm saying pray to know that it is yours already, versus praying to get something that you feel as though is separate and apart from you. Mm-hmm. Because you have to experience what you are. So if this is a part of who you are and what you are, then the natural expression of it has to either be produced out of you or drawn to you. That's the point. So when Emmett Fox wrote, there's no such thing as undemonstrated understanding, he was trying to get across one thing, because I normally don't give the whole context of the quote, but the context of the quote is this. Why does New Thought emphasize demonstration so much? New Thought emphasizes demonstration or manifestation, which is the new buzzword, because demonstration is the proof of understanding. Mm-hmm. All right? Because so just like fundamentalism, regardless of the brand, we'll just use Christian fundamentalism, they have their acid test. The acid test is, do you believe that Jesus Christ died for your sins and your Lord and Savior? That's the acid test. When you start talking about metaphysics, the acid test is what's demonstrating. Mm-hmm. Because regardless of what you think you believe, regardless of what you think you understand, regardless of what you think you know, what's showing up. And it gives us an opportunity to reevaluate our own belief systems, our own perspective, to create a new perception. So New Thought isn't trying to, because we get accused of this from time to time, victim shame, victim blame. It's not that. Because I think there's a big difference between the word blame and the word responsibility. Right. And then there's a big difference between individual responsibility and accountability and collective responsibility and accountability. We also are part of a collective consciousness. So, but when we get back to our own individual experience, the common denominator in our lives and all the aspects of our lives is us. I'm the common denominator in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say there's no such thing as undemonstrated understanding, it gives me, Rev Sheree, the opportunity to ask myself a question. If something isn't showing up the way that I want it to show up, is that saying to me that there's something that I don't completely understand? And if I had the understanding of it properly, this experience would be different.
Mm-hmm.
It gives me an opportunity to evaluate my own understanding. So it gives me the responsibility to shift my belief. It gives me the opportunity to create a different perspective, which gives me the opportunity to create a new perception, which gives me the opportunity to create a new life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is for some, I know maybe just a different aspect or a different way to think about prayer, but this is the power of prayer. This is the true power of prayer. There's a second part to your sermon, and just so you all know where we're going with this, right? So I'm going to share just a couple more clips, and then I believe that we'll have the right mindset to then think about the election differently. And so the title of the sermon is Pray Then Perform, and the scripture, go back and watch this one, y'all. Go back and watch it more than once. The scripture that anchored this part of the lesson is Jesus and Lazarus, when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. So here is the clip. So just to give you some background, because I did not pull everything. I'm pulling what we're going to talk about today, but go back and watch the sermon because it's juicy. So this one is about the perform part.
Perform means to carry out, to accomplish, or fulfill an action, task, or function. When we pray, we must take action on what we prayed about. Once you pray, start to pay attention for ideas, insights, feelings, guidance on what to do or who to contact, or open doors and opportunities. And then once you pay attention to those things and you realize that's what's happening, take God-inspired action.
So I pulled this one because I think sometimes we forget the other part of prayer. Mm-hmm. And I look at prayer as a conversation, right? It's this high conversation I'm having with the divine. And so I recognize that a lot of my time that I'm saying this is my allocated prayer time was me talking to the divine.
Yeah.
Right? So wait a minute, in a conversation, because I've been in these conversations before where you don't really say anything but you know, it's like wait a minute, there all the wisdom there is on the other side of this conversation. Let me be quiet to perceive it. Let me be available for it, because the intent is that I have a different experience. And so I love that you tied those two together so well, to pray then perform. So this God-inspired action. Mm-hmm. How do we get to a God-inspired action?
Well, it requires us to listen. And when I say listen, I don't mean that you will always hear something, you know, but you're in a state of conscious waiting for the answer, for the impulse, for the idea. You're looking for the opportunity. So God-inspired action is, once you get the insight, once you get the guidance, once you get the idea, it will come with an assignment. In other words, there's something to do to make this happen. Now, sometimes the thing to do is be still. Sometimes that's a real thing. Just be still in this and watch the stuff move around you. However, often there are things that we should do, and we need to be mindful of it. Okay, is there a call I need to make? Is it a place I need to go? Is it something I need to do? I love to use the Mae McCarthy story. You've heard me tell this numerous times about how she would, before she was a spiritual teacher, she had a company. She's trying to get in contact with a guy and who lives in a different city. She couldn't get in contact with him. She's in the city for different business. She was trying to go to a Whole Food store.
Mm-hmm.
One was close and one was further. And she was guided to go to the one that was further away. But while she's walking in, the guy she's been trying to get in contact with for the business who can make the decision was pushing his cart right on out of the store into the parking lot. And she was able to get the business right on the spot in the parking lot of the store. That's God-inspired action. In other words, I believe there's a sense of peace. There's a sense of understanding. I really can't explain a feeling to you,
Right.
but there's something that says God is on board with this action. That's why I use the term peace with it. There's a sense of peace and grace, because the anger and the frustration, anxiety, those are normally not, always, I'm not going to say never, but they're normally not God driven. You can have righteous anger to the point you want something to change. You just can't stay there. Eventually you got to be open and receptive to the guidance of the Spirit, because if not, you'll burn yourself out.
Right.
Trying to be the change that you want to see, and now you burnt yourself out. So God-inspired action is really simple. Let me give a real simple answer. When you get whatever you get out of prayer, go do it. Scripture says obedience is greater than sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Scripture also says faith without works is dead.
Yeah. Yes. So I like this floating in this community, this idea, because in this community, we began to shift our thinking. We began to open ourselves up to new ideas. And so one of the things that, like Rev shared about, how do you perceive God? Mm-hmm. Like, know that you may not know, you may not be consciously aware because you've never paid attention. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, like May McCarthy's story, where she looked back, and you can look back on sometimes when things work together. So this is why I enjoy spiritual practices, one, having a spiritual practice, but also things like journaling, at the end of the day, doing gratitude work, because it helps you to reflect on how you flow through the day. And so I want to invite you, if you don't know what God, how you perceive God, whether it's a voice, whether it's a feeling, whether it's I don't know. It's like, it can be indescribable, mm-hmm. but you should know what that experience is like for yourself. And It doesn't have to reflect the way anybody else will perceive it. But I know that sometimes if I am worried about something and I go and I'm out in nature, there are little things you may find in your own life story that help you say, oh, that was God. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was God inspired. Oh, like I didn't, like, she didn't say, I'm going to go over to this other store because something good might happen. You know what I mean? Right. But you can start to perceive those things for yourself. I think it's important to get to know God in you that way. It's a powerful exercise. And that's why spiritual practice is so important, because the more you practice the presence of God, the more you're able to perceive the power and presence of God. I hear you, Rob. Rob said he's glad he pulled up in here today. I love it. I'm glad that you pulled up in here too. All right, I got one clip to play, and then we're going to fold into for the last few minutes, just talking about just what's going on in the world right now. Because I think this clip was so powerful. And we're talking about what do you do? To me, it's like, what do you do after the meantime? Like, some of our feelings have been all over the place. I know my feelings have been all over the place. And so I love that you took the story of Jesus, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, and look to bring it into this current time for us to be able to get some insight on what to do next.
We should grieve when we're processing something, right? We should process the life in and of itself, but don't allow your pause, your emotional resting place, to be your permanent emotional home or way of being. Cry and then get back up. Get about fulfilling God's business. Jesus didn't allow his emotions or the circumstances. And what were the circumstances? Lazarus is dead, that's his friend. Sister Martha is crying and talking about a stinking corpse, and if you'd have got here, Jesus, in time, my brother would still be here. All the circumstances. There's a crowd of people around him. What you gonna do now, Jesus? He didn't allow the emotions, his emotions, or the emotions in the crowd, or the circumstances to stop him. He prayed, then he performed.
So Jesus as the perfect pattern to pray and then perform. But I love the idea that it is just edifying. We're not saying not to feel your feelings. And Reverend Gaylon wasn't on last week's Rewind, where we talked a lot about what was going on in the election. And so I'm grateful that we have a time to revisit that now, because I think that perspective is from a timing perspective. Sometimes you got to know the timing of things, right? And so when someone is in their deepest space of grief, it might not be the time to tell them to perform, right? Like to make a shift. And so he talked about that pause, but not to stay there. So I wanted to invite us to not stay maybe in an emotional state of unrest, because he did I pull this? No, I didn't pull this clip, because he gave such a great example of what the facts around the president-elect Trump, like the facts around this particular person becoming being in the position that they are, and how when you list the facts, twice impeached, having convicted of crimes, like all of these things that aren't typical for someone that you would elect into the highest office in this land, being the experience. But here is what our reality is, right?
Yeah. I do want to interject that one of the things that I did say, and I do think it's important, because I don't want to assume that anybody's political affiliation or beliefs. I said right off the bat, this is a church and we don't take a position.
That's right.
One. Two, what I was stating in the midst of those facts is this is what people were saying to me. And what was stated was just the facts of his recent experience as a politician, the challenges. And then get into the place of, okay, this is an expression of the collective consciousness, not only the will of the people, but the collective consciousness. Therefore, how do we tackle that if we want to stay in spiritual power and not give our power away? If you're upset about it, great. If you're happy about it, great. Now, what do we need to do as truth students to stay in our power? Because, one of the things that I said recently to someone also was that this church was started in 1956 by a Black woman in Chicago. What does that mean historically? Because sometimes it's easy to take people out of their context.
Yeah.
Johnny Coleman, Black woman in Chicago. Chicago, considered the most segregated city, big city in all of the nation, still to this day. Meaning where people live. 1956, Jim Crow laws were still in place. 1956, Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement is just getting started. 1956 is, Black children were just allowed by the Supreme Court to start being able to go to school with white children. Like, put it in its context. And what I said was, this ministry was born and grown, developed, blossomed in what would be considered a very difficult national circumstance for Black Americans, because Reverend Coleman was leaning on a truth that transcended that. Okay, and it is our responsibility to make sure that legacy is maintained. And that's one of the reasons why I quoted her, because I wanted people to understand what is the cloth that you're cut from. If you're part of this ministry, you're part of a stream of thought. We might not look at it from that standpoint. A stream of thought that didn't begin with Reverend Coleman. She caught it. And then she passed it on. And what you and I are doing, Reverend Wells, other ministers at CUT and UFBL and the larger movement are trying to help people catch an idea that your power is not outside of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
important.
I'm gonna play the clip that you shared from her. Because I love the fact I'm almost sure I didn't pull the clip of the facts, because sometimes in the middle of what's going on, sometimes you just got to list what's happening, right? What's happening, because your feelings can run away with you, and you can start telling stories that that are based in no facts, right? But what is actually happening? So I appreciated that. And here's a quote from Johnny.
When you pray.
Oh, that is not the quote from Johnny. Here's the quote from Johnny.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I was twice impeached, criminally convicted.
Okay, maybe I did.
Several criminal cases pending. Lawsuit, losing man who inspired an insurrection on January 6th that got cops killed, who denied his own 2020 presidential loss, who falsely claimed that Haitians were eating dogs and cats, who mocks disabled people on camera, who insults anyone who disagrees with him with insulting nicknames, who calls Hispanic migrants animals regardless of whether you believe they should be here or not, and who fumbled the pandemic, can be reelected as the president. Now, what I just said was not a political thing. I just stated facts.
Okay, here's the clip.
Reverend Coleman wrote, I don't care what they are talking about. I don't care what the president of the United States is talking about. And I don't care how much they're talking about inflation and cutting back this, and we don't have that. Does that have anything to do with you if you are in the right state of mind? Does it? If you have always thought that it did, you thought a lie. And you must begin to unthink it right now. She goes on to write, the president has nothing to do with what you have or do not have. Anyone who wants to stand in the welfare lines, and I'll add any other line, can stand there. My state of mind says that I am rich and I am abundantly supplied by my rich father. And that is not the president. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
So self-identity, right? The self-identity, you talk about being cut from a cloth, of someone who has declared and worked, right? I declared who I am, and now she began to work it out into her experience. What drew you to this particular quote? I mean, it was all as if it was written yesterday. You know what I mean?
Well, I will say is that as I was contemplating the sermon, obviously, I didn't know at the time that I didn't know who was going to win the election. We were all waiting to see whatever. On the other end, the idea of what I wanted to do shifted when that evening, because I was doing other stuff, that evening. I don't watch the CNN for every state. I'm like, okay, let me come back in. Once I plugged in, I said, okay, she's going to lose. I knew right off the bat. I was like, at a certain point. So I popped on Facebook and I saw some stuff of members that were just really sharing their angst, sharing their frustration, because they had the candidate that they wanted to win lost. And then the next day I saw the same thing. So I called Reverend Wells and I said, I'm getting calls, I'm getting texts. He was getting calls and texts. Well, people who were really having a challenge rebalancing themselves, recalibrating themselves. So I said to him, hey, do you mind, before I preach the sermon you assigned me to preach, will you allow me to just address the lack of peace to help pull people back to center, not based upon a political affiliation, solely based upon what do we teach? And he's like, go for it. So I'm contemplating and how I work. You were talking about earlier, how do you know how spirit works in you? Spirit works through me, through my contemplation. As I contemplate thoughts, ideas, etc., I get insights. And the insights are sort of like a skeleton I can build from. Mm-hmm. So it was like, it works if you work it. Reverend Coleman said something about her God is not the president. So now I'm reading the book. I had it highlighted already. Okay, now I have something that I can build on, because it was important, in my opinion, if we're going to talk about the cloth that we're cut from, that I go back all the way back to the founder, and then I bring it back up to Reverend Wells' era. This is what we're trying to help you all understand. All right, that there are going to be situations and circumstances where things are not going to go the way sometimes you want it to go.
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to give up your power when that happens? Or are you going to know who you are regardless of the situation and circumstance? To assume that everybody's going to do what you want them to do, talk like you want them to talk, vote like you want them to vote, act like you want to act, is in my opinion, short-sighted. That's probably the best way I can say that, without using a stronger word. So what ends up happening is people got off the rails. And I said, how do I help them get back on the rails? Now I realize that I'm very direct. I'm the hardcore metaphysician. I've earned that term. And I realize that's difficult for some people to be that direct. But I'm also of the belief that at times you don't shake people out of their states of consciousness that they're struggling with nicety, with for instance, I've used this example before. I think I used it on one of these sermon rewinds when my daughter Angel was a toddler and we were in the front of the house and she just broke and ran toward, the street. Now I could have been like, Angel, stop. Watch cars coming. Stop as I'm running like the Flash to catch her, because it required that level of extra energy. So when you are sometimes struggling to get your mindset from one place to another, sometimes you need a turbo boost. Catherine Ponder, a good friend of this ministry, who was actually ordained with Reverend Coleman, they were classmates. I have the picture. I know they were ordained together. She called it the dynamic laws of, and she would use the word dynamic laws of healing or prosperity or prayer. Why would she use the word dynamic? In those books, she would say, because sometimes you have to explode out of the low levels of consciousness. You have to explode out of the fear. You have to explode out of the anxiety. Because if you try to do it with low energy, sometimes it just doesn't work. You need to put the enthusiasm. We just taught a series on the spiritual faculties in the summer. Sometimes you need that extra zeal or enthusiasm to energize yourself out of what you are in. Yeah. And in my opinion, many of our members were so trapped into the social media posts, the Facebook posts, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, ABC, CBS, whatever, TikTok, that they were stuck. And what I was trying to do was explode them out.
Yeah.
All right. And then once they got exploded out, let me remind you who you are. And then at the end of the sermon, I did a treatment for peace.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't, okay, now that we got you exploded, now I don't have your attention. Let me show you how you can calm yourself down.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's power in that from a timing perspective, because like I said, I believe that you get what you need if you're open and available to it, right? Like you talked about that, this idea of your perspective creates your perception. And so it is important. That's why I talked about the algorithm. Sometimes you got to interrupt the algorithm. You got to interrupt what's being put in front of you and take a moment. And so I appreciate that we have a moment to kind of look at, like, this is just a reflection of our collective consciousness. Let me be with that for a moment. Like, because sometimes you just got to process things. Or wait a minute, let me see what I'm seeing. Let me look at what I'm seeing. Now, what's a higher way? This entire sermon was about lifting your mind beyond what you see. But sometimes you got to look at what you can see. Like, what exactly am I seeing? Because we can be so far into our fantasy and so far into our nightmare mind that we haven't even really said, okay, now what's happening right now? So I love that clip from Dr. Johnny because it is timeless, meaning that the things you talk about that, from the 50s that she worked through were the quote unquote boogeyman from her day. This is how you deal with that. And then this one, I want to play this clip that you shared about the boogeyman of not even today.
You're going for it today. Like,
why not? Why not? Here we go.
Stop turning your political opposition into boogeymen. Stop turning your political opposition into Goliath, where the Israels was cowering in front of Goliath because they thought he was too big to take down. I'm not talking about a man. I'm talking about an ideology. I'm challenging your psychology today. It took a boy named David to get up here and say, who in the world does this dude think he is to stand against the armies of the children of Israel?
So you talking about I went all in. I'm just playing what you said. I'm just playing what you said. But I think that we have to remember that whatever those big giants of opposition in our mind are, right? And this of course extends beyond politics. To be able to sometimes say, wait a minute, I have made a Goliath out of this particular challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I have made this to be, all my language, everybody in that town was like, yo, do you see what's happening? Nobody can defeat this dude, right?
Wow.
And I think that is the idea. No matter, again, this is not about politics, because I think that it's our nature sometime as a human, right? It's our human nature sometime to amplify fears, right?
Mm-hmm.
To amplify fears. And I think that was given to us to serve a purpose, which is don't let the tiger eat you, right? But we have taken it and we just become afraid of a misuse of a gift.
Yeah,
right?
Now the neighbor is the saber-toothed tiger, and let's just be real. And the person on TV you don't like is the saber-toothed tiger, and sometimes, unfortunately, the person you lay down on the same pillow in the same bed with at night is your saber-toothed tiger.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these fear responses which damage our psychology.
Yeah,
they release hormones in our bodies that harm us. We end up with adrenal gland dumps and all different types. We weaken our immune systems. We do all type of stuff for the invisible boogeyman. And we have to get, again, it goes right back to Michael Beckwith's quote: stop telling God about your big problem and start telling your problem about your big God. Prayer will help you shift your perspective. And if it's one thing that this ministry has tried to do through the years, is to help people understand that prayer is the foundation. None of this stuff really works without your own conscious realization of God.
Mm-hmm.
Because if not, it's platitudes. It sounds good. It sounds great. I can wear the pen. I can say I read this. I had the daily inspiration. I've been under Reverend Wells this long. I was under Reverend Coleman that long. And it won't mean a hill of beans difference if you don't have your own personal knowing and understanding of the presence of God as it works in, through, and as you. Mm-hmm. That's your saving grace. Yeah. And if you're waiting on anything else, you will be waiting. No different than these people that have been waiting for 2,000 years. Jesus is coming back. It's the last and evil days and all this type of stuff, because we're still waiting for God to clean up the milk we spilled. When God has empowered us with a rag to clean up our own milk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you so much for this conversation. I got thousands more clips that I could play, but I'm going to stop there because I think that, I always respect people where they are, right? Like, all right, the idea behind the work that we do is to equip you to lift yourself up, right? And so if you're watching this may be your time. You may, it's time for me to shift and to open my mind up to a higher idea. All right. It's time for me to, maybe it's, I understand the processes of grief. I understand how and I believe we got to process our feelings, right? Because I have been absolutely, you could say I bypass my feelings sometimes and I just go to the good thing. And so right underneath is always circling the thing I didn't process. If you think about it, it's kind of like emotional constipation. You never process the waste so that you can then begin to be open and available to what's new and what's higher. So I want to thank you for this space that we're in right now, where maybe you've done some processing and you don't know what to do next. And so pray and then perform. That there is not just, people used to say prayer, I'm sending you thoughts and prayers. And they're like, don't send me thoughts and prayers. Like there was nothing to the thoughts and prayers, right? There's nothing to prayers. No. The power of prayer that was shared today to shift your perspective so that you can see the answer, so that you can see what is yours to do.
Right.
At every given moment. Like this is not like sometimes I think we put God off into this future, our good off into this future, but for what it is for you right now in this moment, I want to thank you for just, again, the wake up call. Thank you for raising the alarm and being that beacon of truth. That is for some, if you're listening to this, just may be your time to wipe your tears, know the truth, and then act from it.
Yeah. And let's just be clear. We're talking about any aspect of your life, because there's some people who are happy. Obviously, with more people that were happy that he won than not, because of the way the election went. So it doesn't make a difference what the thing is. The principle is still the same. And if you get that, prayer lifts you up to where the answer is, because there is a way. You might not be able to see the way right now, but there is a way. Why? Because we can't have a God of all possibility and there not be a way.
Yeah.
Just because we haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
Does not mean that there isn't a way.
Yeah.
Like literally, and I just want to close with this, if you don't mind, whatever you say after this. I was listening to, again, that scientist, because people send me the Neil deGrasse Tyson guy, and now he's in my TikTok algorithm. So he was talking about how transport, will people be able to do the beam me up, Scotty, and all that type of stuff. He's like, no, that's probably not how that would work. And he was talking about how he had tweeted, he would love to be able to, if in airports, if you walked into, you could walk into a wormhole, and on the other side of the wormhole was the part of the airport you needed to be in. And he thought that was pretty clever, until one of his fans tweeted back to him, if you can walk into a wormhole in one place and end up at another place, you don't need the airport and you don't need the plane. Boom. Different perspective.
Yeah. I love that. I love it.
Right. So if we start looking at things from a different perspective, all things are different now.
Yeah.
And like literally what you can't see now will be absolutely available to you in ways that can't be imagined, because the means and mechanism that you understand for a thing to be done doesn't have to be done. It only has to be done at a higher level of consciousness. Your way of getting paid, being healed, being loved, being whatever is totally gets dismissed for the higher expression.
Yeah.
So let's get rid of the buggies and horses, and let's get
listen,
let's
the
get
wormhole,
horse and wagon.
Yeah.
Okay, because people were angry when the car came out, because the people were in the saddle business and the horse
and the
business,
carriage business.
Carriage business. Okay, but that was a way. What is seeking to emerge now as a new way of being for humanity and a new way for you? And the way you find that out is you pray, then you perform.
Yes. Thank you so much. I am grateful for this conversation. I trust that everybody got what they needed. And if you did get one thing, if there's something in here that something I'm sure may have made you a little bit upset, like maybe something came in here like, wait a minute. That's the part I want you to listen to again, because sometimes upset when we're shifting comes and it looks like that. It feels like that. It feels like, wait a minute. So I want you to listen to it again. I want you to grow with us, right? So take this message and listen for yourself, share it with friends. We rewind the Sunday lessons every week. And so we'll be back with the lesson from this upcoming Sunday. So we invite you to join us on Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Central Time for The Message at Christ Universal Temple. Of course, they're on YouTube, so you can watch, and on Facebook, so you can watch from wherever you are. But we would love to have you there live. Maybe live chat with us a little bit. If you haven't live chatted in a long time, come on and live chat. It's fun to be a part of that experience. Who's up this week?
It's Reverend Wells.
Okay, so Reverend Wells will be up, and then I'll be chatting with him next week. But in the meantime, though, be blessed. Pray with expectation, because I didn't talk about that. You got to go listen to the sermon for that. Pray with expectation, and then take God-inspired action. God bless you real good today. We'll be back next week, and enjoy your rest of your day. God bless.
God bless all of you all who are watching live and will watch later.
Thank you.